Have you ever wondered what it would be like if everything you've built were suddenly torn apart by betrayal? Join me as we uncover the story of how I stood up against a massive, corrupt empire, exposing secrets that no one dared face. This is not just a tale of revenge. It's a lesson in courage and justice. Don't forget to like the video if you believe in the power of truth. Comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss out on more inspiring stories like this. Let's spread this message to the world together. My name is Daniel Carter, and for the last 5 years, I've been working as a senior investigator at SafeNet, a leading global cybersecurity firm. It's a job that demands precision, focus, and the ability to anticipate threats that most people don't even know exist. It's the kind of work that becomes second nature after a while, a life built on analyzing data, securing networks, and protecting people from the chaos of the digital world. On the surface, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. My daily routine was as predictable as ever. I'd arrive at the office around 8 a.m., grab a coffee from the break room, and dive into the stack of reports and emails waiting for me. My team was small but efficient, and we were well known for preventing some of the largest cyber attacks in the industry. I'd been a part of SafeNet for nearly a decade, earning the respect of my peers and my superiors. I wasn't one for office politics, and I preferred to keep a low profile, working quietly behind the scenes to ensure the company's security systems were airtight. However, things were starting to feel off. Over the last few months, I'd noticed a subtle shift in the company. New faces had appeared in the halls, consultants with suits that were just a little too expensive for a place like SafeNet. They seemed to hover around the upper floors, having closed-door meetings with the executive team. I didn't think much of it at first, after all. This was a company that prided itself on staying ahead of the curve. But the changes felt deeper than that. As time went on, I was excluded from more and more meetings. Email threads I used to be copied on now bypassed me entirely. The new recruits, most of them fresh out of college, started taking on responsibilities I'd once handled. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I overheard a conversation between 2 of my colleagues in the elevator. They were discussing something I hadn't heard about, a new modernization initiative being implemented across the company. Apparently, SafeNet was planning to overhaul its entire cybersecurity structure, but when I tried to dig for details, I was met with vague answers. It was clear something was changing, but no one would tell me exactly what, and that nagging feeling began to grow something wasn't right. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the lines of code on my screen, trying to push my worries aside. The truth was, I'd built SafeNet's infrastructure from the ground up. I knew every system, every security measure. I knew the backdoors, the workarounds. It had taken years to perfect it, and I was proud of the work we'd done. But now, it felt like the company was slipping away from me. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was working to replace the very foundation I had built. I pushed myself away from my desk and stood up, feeling a sudden pang of unease. That was when I noticed an email in my inbox, unusual, since I'd just checked my email minutes ago. The subject line was simple: urgent, immediate action required. My heart raced as I clicked it open. It was from an anonymous source, someone inside the company who had taken the time to write a cryptic message. "They're coming for you. They've already started. Don't trust them." I sat there, frozen. My first thought was that it was some kind of prank, but deep down, I knew something had changed. And it wasn't a coincidence. SafeNet was in trouble, and I was somehow at the center of it all. The message wasn't signed. No return address, just those words. But they felt real. As I closed my laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I'd worked for, everything I'd trusted was about to come crashing down. The storm was coming, and this time, I wasn't sure I'd be able to weather it. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The night before had been restless. I couldn't stop thinking about that anonymous email. It gnawed at me, feeding a growing suspicion I hadn't been able to shake for weeks. SafeNet had always been a fortress, a company built on trust, integrity, and the unyielding promise of protecting its clients. But now, things felt different. And as much as I wanted to dismiss the email as a hoax, something deep inside told me it was a warning. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. My inbox was flooded with the usual requests, reports, and system updates. I opened one of the emails routine, just another software patch to install. But then I saw something unusual in the list of recipients. My name was absent from the distribution list for the latest cybersecurity audit. I was always included in those. I scrolled down to the bottom of the email, where the list of final reviewers was posted. It was a new name, Jason Phillips, a consultant who'd recently joined the company. Jason Phillips. He had appeared in the last few months, hovering around the executive offices, attending meetings I wasn't invited to. His background was impressive: Stanford MBA, years of experience in high-level corporate strategy, but there was something about him that didn't sit right with me. I had heard whispers in the hallway about how quickly he had risen within the company. Despite having no background in cybersecurity, he was part of the modernization initiative, a term that had begun to take on a sinister tone in my mind. It wasn't just the email that had me uneasy. The whole office felt different. The air was thick with tension. My colleagues, who had once been my friends, seemed distant, distracted. I caught a glimpse of Rachel in the break room. She was one of the few people I still considered a friend, but today she didn't meet my gaze. Her eyes were darting nervously, avoiding mine as if she was afraid of something that wasn't like her. I tried to shake off the feeling and focused on the task at hand, pulling up the security system logs for the last 24 hours. It was a routine check. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A series of unauthorized access attempts had been flagged, attempts to breach internal files I knew were locked down tight. I recognized the IP addresses immediately. They were coming from within the company. I knew it wasn't an accident. Someone inside SafeNet had been trying to break into our own systems. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. The investigation into these breaches would normally be something I'd handle, but now I was being sidelined. The younger analysts had taken over, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided by someone with a hidden agenda. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I needed to dig deeper. I opened the backdoor security logs, the ones I'd set up years ago to track suspicious internal activity. They were meant to be my safety net in case something went wrong. As the data loaded, I scanned through the logs. That's when I saw it. A file transfer had occurred late last night. It was a massive data dump, files from the core security system being moved to an external server. The transfer was flagged as administrative routine, but I knew it wasn't. I felt the weight of the truth settle over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about a few minor breaches. This was organized. Someone inside SafeNet was stealing our own data, selling it to the highest bidder, or worse, using it for their own gain. I needed answers, fast. I glanced around the office. Everyone seemed to be going about their day, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. But I knew better. The calm before the storm was over. And now, I had to figure out who was pulling the strings before everything I had worked for was ripped away from me. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The data theft wasn't a random act, it was deliberate, and it was much bigger than I initially thought. As the hours passed, the realization of how deeply embedded the threat was began to sink in. Someone at SafeNets, someone high up, was orchestrating this. The email from the anonymous source, the unusual access attempts, the missing audits, all of it was pointing to something far more sinister than I had anticipated. I knew I had to act quickly, but I also knew I couldn't trust anyone in the office. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how isolated I had become. SafeNet had changed, and I had been too caught up in my own routine to notice. I had built this company's infrastructure from the ground up, and now, it seemed, it was being used against me. That night, I stayed late in the office, combing through system logs, email exchanges, and audit trails. My eyes were heavy from the strain, but I pushed forward. Every piece of data I uncovered only added to my suspicion. Jason Phillips, the new consultant, had been moving in and out of the office at odd hours, always meeting with the executive team. I traced his steps through our security system, pulling up any logs that might tie him to the breaches. Then, something caught my eye: series of encrypted messages. They were hidden in a backdoor communication channel I had set up years ago for emergencies. Only high-level executives were given access to this system, and it was nearly impossible to trace unless you knew where to look. The messages weren't random. They were instructions, detailed, meticulous steps on how to bypass the company's security protocols. The sender was listed as admin, but there was no name. It wasn't a personal account, it was a system-level access point, one that had the ability to override any of SafeNet's security measures. I felt a chill run down my spine. Whoever was behind this had the keys to the kingdom. They knew everything about SafeNet's internal systems, down to the smallest detail. It was like I was being played, and I had no idea who was holding the strings. I couldn't sit back any longer. I decided to confront Rachel, hoping she could shed some light on what was going on. She was one of the few people left in the company I still trusted, at least I thought I did. I found her in the break room, as usual, staring blankly at her phone. When she saw me, she quickly looked up and forced a smile. "Daniel, hey," she said, but I could tell something was off. Her voice wasn't as confident as usual. "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, my tone serious. "I know you've been involved in the higher level meetings recently. I need to know what's going on. What's really happening with Safe?" Her eyes darted to the door nervously. I could see her pulse quickening, her hands shaking ever so slightly as she set her coffee down. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. "I'm just doing my job, Daniel." I stepped closer, my voice lowering. "Don't lie to me, Rachel. I know about the data breaches, the unauthorized file transfers. I know someone at this company is behind it, and I know you're more involved than you're letting on." Her face drained of color. She didn't say anything, but the fear in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Before I could press her further, the door to the break room swung open. It was Jason Phillips, looking as calm as ever. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. Rachel quickly stood up, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. "Yeah, just catching up," she said, her voice shaking. I locked eyes with Jason for a moment. He knew I was onto something. I could see the warning in his expression. He didn't move, didn't speak, but the tension between us was palpable. This wasn't just a simple case of corporate espionage, it was a carefully constructed plan, and someone was pulling all the strings. As I left the break room, I knew that things had just gotten a lot more dangerous. Jason Phillips was not the consultant he appeared to be, and Rachel, she wasn't the ally I thought she was. I had been set up, and now I had to find out who was behind it, all before it was too late. The following morning, I sat in my office, staring at the security logs on my screen. The familiar hum of the office was drowned out by the beating of my own heart. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me on the edge of a precipice, balancing between knowing too much and not knowing enough. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't know where to start. The clues were there, scattered in front of me, but they were like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that didn't quite fit together yet. I had to talk to Rachel. She knew more than she was letting on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was caught up in something much larger than either of us. She had been acting strange, her behavior growing more erratic. Her voice trembled when I confronted her last night. What was she hiding? And more importantly, who was she protecting? I grabbed my phone and typed a quick message to her. "We need to meet. I know more than you think. 3 p.m. No one else. Please." The message felt like a risk, but I was already deep in this mess. If she was involved, if she was part of this scheme, I needed to know. It wasn't just the company at stake anymore. It was my career, my reputation, and my ability to sleep at night. I couldn't just let it go. By 3 p.m., I found myself sitting in a small, dimly lit cafe a few blocks from the office, watching the door for any sign of Rachel. She was late. The place was almost empty, save for a few regulars, and I found myself pacing the floor, eyes darting to the window every few seconds. The doubt and paranoia I'd been feeling all morning began to intensify. What if this was all a trap? What if Rachel was leading me into something far worse? Then the door opened. Rachel stepped inside, looking around nervously. When her eyes landed on me, she quickly walked over and sat down, avoiding eye contact. "I shouldn't be here, Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but I'm not part of this." "Then why are you involved?" I shot back, my frustration mounting. "You've been acting different lately, Rachel. I know you know something. Who else is involved in this? Is it Jason? Is it someone higher up?" Rachel's face turned pale. She looked like she was about to speak, but stopped herself. Her eyes darted to the door once again, and then she leaned in, her voice trembling. "It's not just Jason, it's the entire leadership team. They're being controlled by someone else." I froze. Controlled? What do you mean? I can't say more. I am scared. Daniel, you have no idea what you're up against. These people, they'll do anything to protect themselves. My mind was racing. If she was telling the truth, then I was up against something much bigger than a simple data breach. This wasn't just about money, it was about power. The kind of power that could ruin lives. "What are they doing?" I asked, leaning closer, trying to get her to open up. "How deep does this go?" I can't tell you everything," Rachel said, her voice barely audible now. "But there's a reason SafeNet is shifting its focus. They're funneling information. They've been doing it for months, maybe longer. I'm not the only one involved, Daniel. You need to be careful. The higher-ups have eyes everywhere." The last part of her sentence sent a chill down my spine. Eyes everywhere. I had always thought I was in control of everything, knowing every system, every weakness. But now, it seemed I was the one being watched. Before I could press her further, Rachel stood up suddenly, her face clouded with panic. "I have to go," she said, backing away from the table. "You have to stop. Don't dig any deeper." "Rachel," I started, but she was already rushing out the door, disappearing into the street. I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of her words settling in. The leadership team at SafeNet was involved in something far darker than I had imagined. But who was pulling the strings? Was it Jason Phillips, or was there someone even more powerful behind the scenes? As I left the cafe, the feeling of being hunted only grew stronger. I wasn't just investigating a data breach anymore. I was uncovering a conspiracy that could destroy everything I had worked for. But I couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake. I had to find out who was behind it, all before it was too late. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of confusion and paranoia. Each moment felt heavier than the last as I tried to piece together the fragments of information Rachel had let slip. The leadership team at SafeNet was involved in something far beyond a simple internal issue. There were forces at play here, powerful and hidden, pulling strings I couldn't yet see. Rachel's warning kept echoing in my mind. They have eyes everywhere. I couldn't stop now. Not when I had seen enough to know that what was happening at SafeNet was more than just corporate corruption. This was about something much darker. The data breaches, the unauthorized access attempts, the strange messages, everything pointed to a calculated plan, orchestrated by someone in the company. But who, and more importantly, who else was involved? That night, I stayed up late going over the logs again. I had to find more, something concrete to tie everything together. SafeNet security systems were designed to withstand the most advanced cyber-attacks, but they weren't perfect. I knew where to look. The backdoor communications, the encrypted messages, and the strange transfer protocols, they were all clues leading to one place. But it wasn't enough. I needed something more. Then a breakthrough came. I had been digging through old internal email chains when I found a thread from 2 years ago. The emails were innocuous at first, discussing routine system upgrades. But then I saw an email from Alex Turner, SafeNet's CFO. It was addressed to Jason Phillips, the consultant who had been circling around the executive team. The subject line read, "Finalizing the plan." The body of the email was brief, but chilling. Alex wrote that they were ready to move forward with a new initiative, and that Jason's firm had been instrumental in getting it off the ground. The final line caught my attention. "We'll need to have the financial backdoor ready before we can proceed." I leaned back in my chair, my pulse racing. A financial backdoor? Was this what Rachel had been warning me about? Was this the thing that had been hidden from me all this time? I pulled up the email attachment. It was a proposal for a new system that SafeNet had been planning to implement, something that on the surface looked like a standard upgrade to the company's internal software. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that this wasn't just an upgrade. It was a blueprint for a system that could allow them to funnel money through fake transactions, disguise illegal activities, and even hide evidence of financial fraud. I had to act fast. I knew that if this system had already been implemented, I was running out of time, but I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone I could trust, someone who would help me expose this before it was too late. I called Rachel again, but this time I didn't leave a message. I couldn't risk giving her a chance to disappear or warn the others. My next step was clear. I needed to meet with her in person. I had to know exactly how deep she was in this, and if she was truly ready to help. The plan was set. I would confront Rachel again, this time in a safe location, away from prying eyes. But as I prepared to leave, I noticed something strange. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Jason Phillips. "We need to talk. I know you're looking into things. Meet me tonight. You don't want to make this a bigger issue." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Was Jason trying to intimidate me, or was he offering a chance to make a deal? Either way, I knew I had no choice but to face him. I wasn't going to back down, not now, not after everything I had uncovered. Tonight, I was going to confront Jason Phillips and, hopefully, learn the truth behind SafeNet's web of lies. The clock read 7:45 p.m. when I arrived at the quiet, upscale bar Jason Phillips had suggested for our meeting. The neon lights outside flickered as I stepped inside. The warmth of the dimly lit interior, a sharp contrast to the cold unease creeping up my spine. I scanned the room, looking for Jason, but the place was nearly empty, just a few late-night patrons sipping drinks at the bar. I spotted him in the back corner, his signature tailored suit looking out of place in such a relaxed setting. He didn't acknowledge me when I walked in, but his eyes followed me as I approached. He gave a small, controlled smile as I sat down across from him. A glass of whiskey already sitting in front of me, though I hadn't ordered it. "You're right on time," he said, his voice smooth, almost too rehearsed. There was something unsettling about him, something cold lurking beneath that polished exterior. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "What is this all about, Jason?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "What's really going on at SafeNet? And why the secrecy? You and I both know I've been digging, and I'm not about to stop until I get answers." He leaned back in his chair, swirling the whiskey in his glass with a casual flick of his wrist. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Daniel," he replied, his tone light but warning. "You should have left this alone, but I guess I can't blame you. Curiosity is what got you where you are. And now, here we are." I narrowed my eyes, feeling the weight of the conversation growing heavier by the second. "I don't want threats, Jason. I want answers. What's this financial backdoor you're setting up at SafeNet? What's your role in all of this?" Jason studied me for a moment, his lips curling into a half smile, as if he were debating how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke, his voice lowered to a near whisper. "You think it's just about money, don't you?" he asked. "SafeNet's growth, its entire reputation, it's not just about securing data anymore. We've been setting up something bigger, Daniel. A way to control the flow of information, to make sure the right people stay in power." My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't expected this. I thought I was investigating a simple case of financial fraud. But what he was describing sounded like something far more dangerous, something with political implications. "What do you mean by the right people? Are you talking about the leadership at SafeNet, or someone else?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Jason's expression hardened. "It's not just about SafeNet anymore. It's about global power. You see, the cybersecurity industry is where the real money is. But even more than that, it's where the power lies. Information is control, Daniel. And SafeNet is in a prime position to be at the center of it all." I felt a chill run down my spine. The implications of his words were enormous. "And you're using SafeNet as a vehicle for all of this?" Jason didn't deny it. Instead, he continued, "You've been a part of this company long enough to understand how things work. You've built this place, Daniel, but now you're in the way. You and your obsession with security, you think the company's integrity is worth protecting, but it's not. Not anymore." My mind was racing. I was piecing together fragments of what Jason had said, and the picture that was forming was terrifying. They weren't just manipulating financial systems. They were manipulating power on a global scale, using SafeNet as a tool to control and secure information for whoever held the reins. They were playing a game I had never even seen coming. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not now that I knew the truth. You've said enough, I said, standing up abruptly. I know what you're really doing, and I'm going to stop you. Jason stood as well, his eyes cold and calculating. I don't think you understand, Daniel. You don't have the power to stop this. You never did. You're just a pawn in a much larger game. And right now, you're in over your head. As I turned to walk away, I could feel his gaze on my back, like a predator sizing up its prey. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the pieces I needed. I knew what was at stake, and I wasn't going to back down. Jason Phillips may have thought he was the one pulling the strings, but he hadn't counted on me. And I wasn't going to let SafeNet alone the world fall into the hands of people like him. It was time to take back control. The days following my meeting with Jason Phillips were a blur of calculated steps and mounting tension. With every passing hour, the realization of how deeply entrenched the conspiracy within SafeNet went became more apparent. Jason had made it clear I was no longer just investigating a corporate scandal. I was up against a well-oiled machine, a system of power that extended far beyond the confines of the company. The threat of exposure wasn't just financial, it was political, global, and dangerous. I needed a plan. I couldn't just confront the higher-ups at SafeNet or go to the authorities without solid proof. I knew too well how easily people in power could silence a whistleblower, especially when the stakes were as high as they were now. But I couldn't let them win. I had already seen enough. SafeNet wasn't just manipulating financial systems for profit. It was positioning itself as the gatekeeper of information, a player in a much bigger, darker game. That night, I sat in front of my laptop, piecing together everything I had learned. The encrypted files, the secret communications, the financial discrepancies, it was all connected. But what was the end game? What were Jason, Alex Turner, and the others really after? As I scrolled through the records again, something stood out. Among the encrypted communications, I found a reference to a project codenamed Blackout. The details were sparse, but the more I dug, the more I realized this was the key. Blackout wasn't just about securing data. It was about disabling the systems of SafeNet's competitors, rendering their cybersecurity networks useless, and taking control of entire markets. They had already infiltrated multiple major corporations under the guise of providing cybersecurity services. They had been planting backdoors, quietly siphoning data, and positioning themselves to control the flow of information at a global scale. I knew I had to expose this, but to do that, I needed more than just digital evidence. I needed leverage, something concrete that would force the board to listen. The financial transactions, the shady meetings, none of it would matter if I couldn't tie it directly to the people in charge. It was time to make my move. I couldn't trust anyone at SafeNet anymore, especially after the warning from Rachel. She had been right about one thing. The higher-ups had eyes everywhere. But what if they didn't know about the information I had? What if they didn't realize I was already several steps ahead? I reached out to an old contact, Robert Chen, a former board member who had left SafeNet years ago after a falling out with the leadership. Robert had always been one of the few people I could trust. He wasn't involved in the day-to-day operations, but he had a deep understanding of the company's inner workings. If anyone could help me get this to the right people, it was him. We arranged to meet in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. The place was a far cry from the sleek, corporate locations I was used to, and that was exactly why I chose it. There, away from prying eyes, we could talk freely. When Robert walked in, I immediately saw the concern on his face. His sharp eyes scanned the room before he made his way to the table where I was waiting. "You've got something, don't you?" he asked, sitting down without wasting time on pleasantries. I nodded, sliding the folder across the table. This is it, the whole operation. The financial fraud, the data manipulation, the global scale of it. Everything. Robert flipped through the pages quickly, his expression growing darker with each passing second. This is massive, Daniel. If this gets out, it could bring SafeNet to its knees. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. And it's not just SafeNet. This is bigger. The people involved, Jason Phillips, Alex Turner, they're playing a game that could destabilize industries. They've already infiltrated more than one company, and they're moving to the next stage. I need to expose them before it's too late. Robert was silent for a long moment, taking in the magnitude of what I had uncovered. Finally, he spoke. You realize this could destroy everything you've worked for, don't you? Your career, your reputation, it could all come crashing down. I don't care about that anymore, I said, my voice steady. This is bigger than me, bigger than SafeNet. This is about stopping a force that's bigger than all of us. Robert took a deep breath and looked me square in the eye. I'll help you, Daniel, but we do this carefully. If we move too fast, they'll cover their tracks. We need a strategy, and we need to make sure the right people see this. The board, the media, anyone who will listen. I nodded. I have a plan. But I need you to help me get this to the right hands. As we left the cafe, I felt a shift in the air. The pieces were in place, but the real battle was just beginning. The web was tightening, and I had just lit the fuse. The following days felt like a game of cat and mouse. Every move I made was carefully planned, but I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. Even with Robert's help, the walls were closing in. SafeNet's executives had to be aware that I was on their trail. The pressure was mounting, and I knew that if I didn't act quickly, everything I had worked for, everything I had uncovered would disappear without a trace. I spent the next few nights preparing my final move. Robert had agreed to help me get the evidence into the right hands, but that wasn't enough. The leadership at SafeNet had become too powerful, too embedded in the system. I couldn't just expose them, I had to ensure they couldn't cover their tracks. The web of corruption went deeper than I had realized, and I had to ensure that those involved would face real consequences. I began collecting everything I had: financial records, internal emails, encrypted messages, and most importantly, the Blackout Project documents. The plan was clear. I would send everything to the board of directors, but I wouldn't just send it through a normal email. No, that would be too easy for them to dismiss. Instead, I was going to expose it in a way they couldn't ignore. I called Robert and arranged a meeting. We needed to make sure that the board would be forced to acknowledge the evidence, no matter how much they wanted to bury it. The time's come, I said when we met in his office. I've got everything ready. It's all there: Blackout, the money transfers, the emails from Phillips and Turner. Everything. Robert looked over the stack of files I handed him, nodding slowly. This is going to shake things up, Daniel, but it's not enough to just send it. We need to make sure it gets to the right people who will act on it. I've already got a plan for that, I replied. I'm going to send it to the board with a message attached. The message will be clear. They either act or I make it public. I'll include a copy of the Blackout Project and make sure the media gets it within 24 hours. If they don't move quickly, it will be too late. Robert's eyes widened. You're risking everything, Daniel. This isn't just going to end your career. Could put your life in danger. I know, I said, my voice steady. But it's too late to back out now. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about stopping what they're doing before they ruin more lives. We spent the next hour going over the details of the plan. Everything had to be perfect. The timing had to be precise. Robert would help me get the report into the hands of a few key board members who were known for their integrity. I would send the email to the others, attaching the evidence with a message that was impossible to ignore. Then, we would make sure the media had it exposing the full scale of what SafeNet had become. Later that night, I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had the evidence. I had the plan. Now, I just needed to push the button. But something held me back. A small voice inside my head whispered, "What if they catch you? What if they retaliate?" But I couldn't listen to that voice. I had already come this far, and I couldn't turn back now. With a deep breath, I clicked send. The message was out. The pieces were in motion. There was no turning back. As I leaned back in my chair, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was done. The truth would come out, whether they liked it or not. Now, all I had to do was wait. I spent the next few hours pacing the floor, my nerves on edge. I had done everything I could to ensure my plan was airtight, but now, all I could do was wait. The email had been sent, the evidence was out there, and the board members who had received the dossier were already discussing it. The moment I had been building up to 4 weeks had finally arrived. But even as the seconds ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I had expected this, the waiting, the tension. But there was something else, a gnawing sense of impending chaos. What if the people I trusted most had betrayed me? What if the board sided with SafeNet's corrupt leadership and swept it all under the rug? I had to stay focused. The truth was out now. I had taken the gamble, and now it was their move. The phone buzzed on my desk, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Robert. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. The board is in emergency session. They're not taking this lightly. I've seen some of the responses already. This is bigger than we thought. My pulse quickened. That was the first sign that they were being forced to acknowledge the truth. The storm was finally breaking, and it was far more intense than I had anticipated. I replied quickly, "Keep me posted. This needs to go all the way." I knew that whatever happened now, I couldn't back down. My career was already on the line, but it was more than that. If I didn't see this through, all the lives that had been affected by SafeNet's manipulation would have been in vain. This wasn't just about me. It was about justice. Then, another text came through. This one was from an unknown number. It read, "I hope you're ready for the consequences of your actions. SafeNet has deep connections. Daniel, you have no idea who you're up against." I stared at the screen, feeling a chill run through me. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. Whoever sent this knew something I didn't. They had power, and they had the resources to make things go away. But I had already crossed that line. There was no going back. I stood up, pacing again, the weight of everything pressing on me. I checked my watch. It was nearly 11 p.m. The meeting had been going for over an hour now. I needed to know what was happening. I could feel my phone vibrating again, but I couldn't bring myself to look. It could be another threat, another intimidation tactic. But then I heard my phone ring. It was Robert. I answered it immediately. "What's happening?" My voice was tight with anxiety. "There's chaos," Robert said, his voice strained. "The board is split. Some want to take immediate action, but others are, well, let's just say they're trying to cover things up. They're looking for a way to silence this fight." My stomach dropped. I had anticipated this. but hearing it out loud made it real. The board wasn't unified. Some wanted to clean house and fix things, but others were desperate to protect their interests. Jason Phillips, Alex Turner, and the rest of the corrupt leadership team had powerful allies. "Don't let them hide it, Robert. We need this to go public. Now," I urged. "I'm doing what I can," he replied. "But we're not the only ones in play. There are bigger forces involved here. People with deep pockets. You're not just fighting SafeNet now, Daniel." I leaned against my desk, trying to steady my breathing. This was bigger than I'd imagined. But even knowing that, I couldn't back down. They had underestimated me, and now they were going to pay for it. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls, messages, and moments of tension. The storm that had been brewing was finally breaking, and the pieces were falling into place. I had exposed the truth, and now there was no way to put it back in the box. The fight was just beginning, and I would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The next morning, the world felt different. The chaos of the previous night had given way to a quiet tension, the kind that comes just before everything changes. I had done what I could to bring the truth to light, but now it was out of my hands. I waited for the inevitable backlash, knowing that it would be coming, but still. A part of me couldn't help but feel the weight of what I had set in motion. At 8 a.m. sharp, my phone buzzed with a message from Robert. "Emergency board meeting starting in 10. They're scrambling, but the truth is out there now. It's only a matter of time." I felt a slight relief wash over me. The board was finally confronting the situation head-on. But the other part of me, the part that had spent the last few weeks uncovering the depths of SafeNet's corruption, knew this wasn't going to be over so easily. This wasn't just a corporate scandal anymore. It had become a fight for power, for survival. SafeNet's top executives weren't going to let their empire crumble without a fight. By noon, things began to escalate rapidly. News outlets were picking up the story, citing leaks from within the company. Financial analysts were speculating about the impact on SafeNet's stock price. The media had caught wind of the financial fraud, the data manipulation, and the shady dealings that had been taking place right under everyone's nose. The public was starting to demand answers. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on the phone calls and emails pouring in from various contacts, but my mind kept drifting back to the board meeting. I needed to know what was happening behind closed doors, who was going to take the fall, and more importantly, who was going to come out on top. As if on cue, my phone rang again. This time, it was Robert. "They're cracking," he said, his voice low and tense. "Alex Turner is trying to pin it all on Jason Phillips. He's saying that Jason was running the show, and that he was the one who orchestrated the entire thing. But the board isn't buying it. They're trying to figure out who else was involved." "Are they going after the others?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "They're considering it, but it's a mess. Jason's lawyer just walked into the room, and he's already talking about a settlement. They're offering him a reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation, but Jason's not going down without a fight." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This was exactly what I had been afraid of. They were already starting to cover their tracks, throwing each other under the bus to save their own skins. The battle for control of SafeNet had turned into a brutal game of survival, and the real question was who would come out victorious. "I'm going to meet with the press," Robert continued. "We can't let them control the narrative. We need to make sure the truth comes out completely." I didn't need to think twice. "Do it," I said, the decision feeling final. "We've come too far to let them spin this. They've been hiding behind their lies for too long." As soon as I hung up, I knew the final stage of this game had begun. The media was now our ally, and it was time to turn the spotlight on the people who thought they could get away with everything. There was no more room for negotiation. It was all out in the open now, and I was ready for the fallout. At 3 p.m., the first of many official statements from SafeNet's board came through. They had fired Alex Turner, and Jason Phillips was being investigated by federal authorities. The executive team was in turmoil, with several key players stepping down or being suspended pending investigation. But it wasn't over yet. As I sat back, watching the company unravel, I felt the weight of the battle I had won. It was justice cold, calculated, and precise. But even as I watched the storm crash down on SafeNet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the game wasn't over. The pieces had shifted, and now I was in control. I looked at my phone, and a message from Robert appeared. "The board approved your role. You're the new Chief Security Officer. We're taking this to the next level." A sense of satisfaction washed over me. SafeNet had been brought to its knees, but now it was time to rebuild. And this time, I would be the one making the rules. The lesson from this story is about standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Daniel's journey shows the power of truth in a world where corruption can easily thrive in silence. It teaches us that no matter how small we feel in a system designed to keep us in the shadows, we all have the ability to expose injustice and make a difference. Daniel didn't just fight for his career. He fought for the integrity of his work and the truth that had been buried by powerful forces. His courage to face the consequences, to push through fear and doubt, ultimately brought down those who thought they were untouchable. The story also reminds us of the importance of trusting our instincts and recognizing when we're being manipulated. In the end, it's not the position you hold or the power you wield that matters, it's the strength of your character and your commitment to doing the right thing, no matter the cost. Daniel's victory wasn't just about exposing the corrupt system. It was about reclaiming the control over his life, his integrity, and his future.